Some of you know that I worked as a fishing guide for a while. I cut my teeth on the lower Rogue River, I worked in Kamchatka, and I ran a small business in Oregon. But I never committed to the grind. What's the grind? Well, that's one of the things we're going to talk about. In this episode of Fin and Fire with Jeff Mishler, I interview Robbie Skerratt, a full-time hunting and fishing guide from the woods of northern Michigan. Robbie spends 4 months working at Blue Fly B&B in King Salmon, Alaska, and the rest of the year chasing critters on his home turf. Robbie loves the grind. So if you ever considered working as a full-time fly fishing guide, this episode will help you make that choice. Fin and Fire Fly Shop is your local fly shop, available 24/7. At finandfire.com, you'll find the best selection of Simms, Sage, G. Loomis, and all your favorite brands. It's Robbie Skerratt, right?
Yep.
That's how you pronounce it, Skerratt.
Skerratt.
Like Tom Skerratt, the guy who was in River Runs Through It.
Exactly.
But he's not a relative.
No, my dad used to. That was his joke. He was my cousin or my uncle, but spelled differently. So I don't know.
It is spelled differently.
Yeah, it's ITT for him, ATT for me. Yeah, that was my dad.
Well, thanks for meeting with me. I've been really looking forward to this interview because I think what's interesting is there's a lot of people who have the idea that they want to be an Alaskan fishing guide. You know,
Sure.
They want to come to Alaska and be a fishing guide, and the reality of being an Alaskan fishing guide is very, very different than the idea of being an Alaskan fishing guide, and that's what I want to talk to you about a little bit, because I know you have a pretty broad background in a lifetime and a lifestyle of hunting and fishing. But what I really want to get into a little bit is, when you first came up here, how did it meet your expectations, or did it meet your expectations? What was that reality like for you?
I think it actually exceeded, my expectations at first. So my first guide job up here was with Dave Egdorf at Western Alaska Sport Fishing. He's since sold, but on the upper Nushagak River up near Big Bend, the confluence of McGeary Creek and the Noosh. But Dave was just such a character, and I guess pretty influential in my guiding career going forward. But meeting him for the first time and hopping in his plane and flying up to the upper Noosh in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we were 90 river miles from the nearest village at that point, about an hour and a half float plane ride from Aleknagik to get up there. Kind of didn't realize what I'd signed myself up for. I wanted the remote Alaska experience, and flying in that first time definitely it was eye-opening.
What were the conditions like? I mean, what was camp like?
Camp was, so the clients would stay in weatherport tents. So we had hardwood floors and weatherport tents that the clients would stay in. We had 2 buildings. One of them we built my first year up there. It's kind of they're hard walled with trusses, and then we had canvas and tarp tops for the top of them with big barrel stoves to generate heat. Then our kitchen tent, we had ovens that we'd put in there on propane. But everything had to come in on Dave's plane. We're way above where a barge can navigate, non-navigable water up there. So everything I would have to, whatever we had, all came off of his plane. And so the guides themselves, we stayed in plywood shacks. So I always joke about, trailer park boys and bubbles living in the shed. That's kind of like how we lived up there for 4 months at a time.
Yeah, the guide quarters for some reason are always a little less than the client quarters when it comes to sleeping and eating conditions. I don't know. Did you get to eat with the clients, or did you have your own eating quarters too?
No, we'd eat all of our meals with the clients. That was kind of a neat thing there. So we got a lot of interaction time with the people, which was pretty fun. So, and it was, a little bit different than like a big lodge setting. We're up in the middle of nowhere, so it was a little bit more of a remote, rustic kind of a camp. Okay. So we'd all eat in the kitchen tent together, do breakfast, and then we'd eat lunch on the river, and then dinner together back at the kitchen tent at the end of the night.
What did a day look like for you? I mean, when you were there, let's say starting when your first year was there compared to your last year, how did it change?
Sure. So like a normal day, I mean, we'd get up, we'd be on the water by 8 o'clock usually every day. So, we were waking up usually around 6:30, getting the boats ready. We try to do that at the end of the night, but that works for about the first month until you're tired. And then you try to, I hate to say that, we kind of put that stuff off to the next morning kind of a lot of times. So a lot of the time in the morning, we're, greasing up their jets and gassing up our boats and getting our boats clean and ready for clients. And then, we'd always have a fire every morning out by the river. So we'd do coffee and kind of wake up with the clients out at a bonfire. And then when breakfast was ready, we were called into the tent. We'd go have our breakfast and then load gear into the boats and hit the river until 5 o'clock every night. So,
what were you fishing for mostly up there?
Mostly rainbows and Dolly Varden was kind of like our target species. We did a lot of grayling up there too. So we're a little bit high for fresh salmon. We would get into them, but we'd get a lot of chums early up there. Big kings, but it was closed for spawning ground, so we wouldn't really target kings or anything like that. But mainly Dolly Varden and rainbows and grayling. That was kind of our game.
How many years did you do that?
It was 4 years with Dave. So, the first year, and then after that, kind of had the mass exit. We had a bunch of guys that had been guiding up there for a while that kind of left, and then I came back for my second year, and Dave kind of threw me in the position of head guide for my second season in Alaska, which was a little wild up there, but it worked out really good. We had a great crew, and I really enjoyed my time with them.
Excellent. So you also work in Michigan as a guide in your off season.
Yeah, I guess so. My off season, right, sure. So that's where I started guiding, was in Michigan, 2012, and mainly all trout stuff. But the nice thing with Michigan, it's a pretty diverse fishery, so we get to do a little bit of everything. We do have some salmon. Trout, we call steelhead. I know you West Coast guys don't like to
they're steelhead. Oh, I fish for them. They're steelhead. They eat, and they're definitely steelhead.
And then we have the warm water stuff too. So we got a lot of pike and bass. Smallmouth bass has become a really big avenue for us, I guess, in the summer if I'm there. Now I'm not there as much to do the smallmouth bass stuff, but in the springtime and in the fall when I get back, I do a little bit of steelheading, and I'm fortunate I live on a river that gets a little push of steelhead, so I'm able to take people down in my raft and we'll hit some spots there. And then later in the spring for us, kind of transitions into some dry fly fishing. It was, streamer fishing in between, but definitely have some really great dry fly fishing late spring, early summer, usually end of May, early part of June, and then I pack up and head up north. So I try to get a little bit of that in before I head up here.
Right. So tell me about how it all worked out that you came to work for Patricia at Blue Fly. How did that all happen?
Yeah, so through Eric Peterson, who's been guiding with Patricia for a while. We live in the same area in Michigan, and we just have been buddies for a while. And at that point, I kind of took some time away from Alaska. I was guiding out in Montana, and I had got the itch to come back up here. And like when you get your captain's license and things of that, Alaska kind of grabs you and doesn't really let you go. And it's like, what am I going to do? Am I going to charter salmon boats in Michigan and do the trout stuff? And then, the whole experience with COVID and being kind of locked up in my little cabin in the middle of nowhere for a little while kind of got the travel bug itch going again. And so that spring I started making some calls to some friends that were still working up in Alaska at the time. And just saying, I wanted to get back, and I missed it up there. It took a year off, and that was all it took for me to realize that I wanted to be back in Alaska. And me and Eric started talking, and he mentioned that Patricia might be looking for a guide for the season. Last season was my first year with Patricia, so then just kind of worked out, and
here you are.
Here I am, and I love it. And I'll probably be stuck here until she kicks me out.
It's not a bad place to work.
No, it's great. I love it.
When you compare this to other places you work, what's the one thing that stands out the most is like, this really seals the deal for me?
The fall. I think the fall is such a special thing here. Swinging those giant rainbows up in the fall, doing our little spay program is a blast. I absolutely fell in love with this river all over again doing that. I really enjoyed doing the salmon program, and the fly out stuff is a blast too, don't get me wrong, but when you hook into like a 30-inch rainbow on the swing up here and they pull harder than any steelhead I've caught in the Midwest especially. I mean, it was just such a unique thing. It totally kind of, tripped up my mind a little bit. And I was like, and that kind of just totally sealed the deal. And not to mention Patricia's a great person to work for. She's a sweetheart. So that's great.
Well, I think she's pretty particular about who does work here. And I just have been impressed with the quality of the fishery, but also not only the quality of the clients, but then also the quality of the guides that she hires. Just, you and Eric are rock solid people. And so I think that is a critical part of her business plan also, to have that kind of reliability when it comes to employees day in and day out. And so It's apparent to me, and I'm only here, for a little bit. I only come up for a week or so a year. I don't really get to settle in and see how it all works, but it seems to work.
Yeah, it seems to work great. I like it, and I like kind of having the smaller crew too. It's definitely an intimate setting, and I feel like we all, have our different qualities as guides. And Patricia knows this river so well. It's pretty amazing. Just running up and down with her and her pointing out different places. She's got that memory like you want in a fishing guide, right? I've hit fish here, I've hit fish there, and this 30 whatever inch, trout off of that corner, and this and that. And Eric's very similar in that regard when he guides too. He knows all of his little spots too. So it's really cool, fishing with those two, kind of, learning the river from them and then just going hunting with them. It's great. I love it.
I think people who hunt, love to hunt trout, love to hunt deer, love to hunt elk or whatever. I like to know a little bit about what, you hunt back in Michigan. And how old were you when all of this kind of kicked in for you? Did you hunt and fish when you were a kid, or was it something you kind of grew into? No,
definitely hunted and fished as a kid. It definitely got worse as I got older. I got more obsessive with it, I should say. I was fortunate growing up in northern Michigan, there's lakes and rivers everywhere. And I came from a family that loved water, so we grew up on a small lake. So I fished all the time as, a little kid with my dad for bass and pike and perch and whatever. But as a little kid, I'd go out on my own. We had a little paddle boat, and my neighbor used to sink his old Christmas trees and tires and junk, make little piles for rock bass and bluegill and stuff like that. So I knew where every single one of those were off the end of his dock by the time I was like 9 years old. So I just take my little paddle boat and go right out there and drop a worm down and pull, rock bass out all the time as a kid. So yeah, I loved to fish growing up. My grandpa's the one that kind of got me into fly fishing. He also lived on a small lake, and he loved to fly fish on the Asable River, which a lot of people kind of know that one back in Michigan. So he got me a little 5-weight when I was 9 years old, and I'd go out to the end of the dock with him, and we had this little popper kit, and we'd throw little poppers out there and catch bluegill and small bass off the end of his dock, and that kind of got away from the fly fishing side of it for a while and got really into walleye fishing and trolling for salmon and lake trout, and then kind of came full circle later on. But yeah, so fishing ever since I was little, hunting as well. My dad was big into hunting birds. He loved to go hunt grouse and woodcock back home, so I started doing that when I was like 12 years old. Started hunting deer when I was 12, as soon as you can in Michigan, as soon as I could get my hunter safety. I had my little 45-pound bow, and I'd try to stick whatever would walk by as a little kid, So we go to our family cabin, and we had a little cottage on the Asable that was on my mom's side of the family. We'd always go down there fishing and hunting growing up, so it's always been a big part of my life growing up. And
good life.
Really good life. Been fortunate.
I think most of the people I talk to who have a really intense passion for the outdoors have had a really interesting upbringing as kids. Sure. It's something that they got into at an early age. Yeah, and I think I was very fortunate. My dad, I wouldn't say he was an avid outdoorsman at all. He enjoyed to go. He liked to go, and he definitely introduced it to me. And it's something that I took to as a kid, and it became kind of an obsession, to a degree. And I loved to go as often as I could. I'd beg him to take me all the time. And then that was a nice thing about having being on the lake as a kid, having my own freedom with the paddle boat and a little rowboat, and so I just go by myself, and then in high school, me and my buddies would just go bass fishing all the time, and so that was kind of our thing. We just go out to the lake, we know where to go, we just kind of putz around and go catch bass at that point, and then then kind of circle back to the trout thing a little bit later on. So yeah, I had the same stories. I spent so much time just poking around in the woods, bluegill ponds. I can't imagine letting my kids ride, 5-6 miles across town with a fishing pole to go hang out with a buddy for an entire Saturday afternoon on a farm pond, sitting out on a rickety old dock that could fall into the water at any time. And my parents don't know this. They have no idea that I'm like precariously dangling over this farm pond. And I mean, for me to imagine my kids just heading out and I have no idea where they are or what they're doing, I have to wrap my head around that. But it was just part of It was just like the way it was. It's just
and I think part of it too, I was like one of those high energy kids, so maybe they didn't care when I was gone.
Yeah,
I was out of their hair,
Just get out of here, kid.
Then the winter was kind of fun too, because we on the lake, I had my own little snow machine as a kid, and my buddy would have his ice fishing shanty, and so I always had a key or knew where the key was to get in. I'd just zip out there and spud out the hole, or go drill my own holes and ice fish, So it's always something to do. Something to have fun with,
Right. I mean, I think the parents just were trying to get rid of us.
Yeah. Go bug someone else for a little while.
Go shoot a squirrel or something. Yeah, exactly. When you get back home in the fall, I want to come back to Blue Fly at some point, but when you're looking forward to the fall at the end of a trout season, explain what your fall looks like after you've put in a hard season here.
Well, for me, really, it's just going home to relax. I mean, I got stuff to take care of back home, obviously, like anybody. But I look forward to just going to sitting in a tree and just kind of hanging out, looking for whitetail. That's kind of what we do in the Midwest, especially in northern Michigan. Whitetail hunting is kind of almost its own religion to a certain degree, right? So when I get out of here, I think that's kind of like my main thing I'm excited about is I get right into the heart of archery season when I get home, and I just kind of want to just unplug for a little bit. I spend a lot of time on the water and a lot of days working, and so it's just nice to kind of do my own thing and kind of step away from fishing for a little bit.
Do you have spots that are historical spots you go back to every year?
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. It's kind of like I feel like I'm like lucky in my guide career for the people I've gotten to work for. Patricia and then Dave and I have some buddies back home that have some really great properties that have let me kind of hunt on those properties for years. So we always kind of do a trip around Halloween, me and a couple of my friends. It's kind of been like our annual hunting trip together. It's like archery camp. We go down and we hunt. It's in mid-Michigan, so it's a little bit of a drive from where we're at up north, and kind of in ag country. And he's got family property down there that we've been hunting pretty hard for going on almost, he's been hunting it forever. I've been hunting on it for about 10 years now. So I really look forward to that trip. It's kind of like our favorite week, long weekend kind of thing. You kind of get together with my buddies and go talk shit and try to shoot a deer.
Do you kill nice bucks down there?
We do. That's kind of a nice area for us, especially compared to where I'm at up north. The hunting's a little bit different. I'm more in the woods up there. Our deer aren't as big. Big body deer, we don't see the rack size like you see down in the ag country in southern Michigan. Not sure exactly why. My working theory is there's a lot more subsistence style hunting going on up north, and people are filling the freezer more than they're looking for that buck to put on the wall kind of a thing.
Right.
So there's the mentality of it's brown, it's down is alive and well in northern Michigan. If
it flies, it dies. If it's brown, it's down.
Yeah, it's hard to explain catch and release angling too to those guys. I show them a big picture of a nice brown trout or something. I like, oh, that would have been good on the smoker. How was it? And like, oh, it's still alive and kicking. What? They just can't wrap their head around that. So
didn't you eat it?
Yeah, exactly.
How come you didn't eat it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of nice when I get to go down and hunt down there, because you just see a different quality, different type of deer that you're not accustomed to seeing up north, and a lot more deer too. So it's a lot more private land down there. I think that's another, avenue for bigger deer, is they're just not pressured as much as where I'm at is a lot of public land, big blocks of public land. So they get a lot of hunting pressure, a lot of deer camps, and a lot of, people going after whatever. So when you get down into those southern blocks, it's family farms and big private stretches is not the amount of public land and public hunting pressure. So maybe the deer are able to grow a little bit, and you can be a little more selective because you're going to see that deer again, or
right.
You don't really get that opportunity very much up north. Usually, if you see a nice buck, it's going down.
When I was a kid learning to hunt elk on the Oregon coast, you pretty much knew if there was a bull standing in the open somewhere, if you didn't get there to harvest that animal, someone was going to shoot it within an hour. It didn't matter where it was. Somebody was looking at that opening from miles away. And if that bull stepped out in the open, you better be on it, because someone else is going to get there before you did. And
funny, kind of reminds me of a hunting story when I was a kid, but hunting with my dad, go back to hunting growing up. And I think I was 8 years old or something. It was like... I was allowed to go to deer camp for the first time. So it was a pretty big deal for me going to deer camp with my dad and my uncles. And but I was young and I didn't really care to hunt. I mean, getting into it and kind of learning the ropes to a degree, but I'm out with my dad and I can't sit still for 5 minutes at a time. And so he'd kind of given up on the hunt and was just having some father-son time, and we're laughing and joking, and, he's probably drinking beer. So, he's kind of over it at this. Like, it's not going to happen. He's too loud. He can't sit still. And this little spike horn comes out. And it's probably one of the bigger spikes I've ever seen in Michigan. It's like 11-inch tines on each side. And I got so excited about that buck coming out. Shoot him, shoot him, shoot him, shoot him. And he's trying to be quiet, Finally, he ends up not wanting to shoot the spike, but shot it because it's, a nice father-son moment, I guess, And he ended up mounting that deer. So we still have that deer at my house now. I got this little spike horn, full shoulder mount spike horn. It's like, everyone's like, why would you mount that? And I'm like, well, there's a little bit of a story behind it. It's the first deer I've ever seen, so.
I know. I've taken my daughter hunting a few times, and it's been really tough. We even hunted on a little bit of private land. A friend of mine has a nice place there on the eastern slope of the Coast Range, and just creating that opportunity for a kid for the first time is really hard. I mean, we've been out there during prime time a couple of times trying to find a blacktail buck, and it just didn't materialize. And I'm still trying to put that together. She's a little older now, and she's kind of like, well, I don't know if I really want to do this, but my hope is that she'll turn around when she gets a little older and realize that it's quality time in the woods with dad as opposed to just killing a deer or whatever. But we'll see. But that's a challenge, being able to create that moment with your kids. That's the thing I'm finding really difficult these days is being able to put enough time into the effort so that there's the realization of the full process. They get the full circle moment, because you can practice shooting, you can practice all your woodcraft and hunting skills, but if you don't close the deal, you got to see it all come to fruition. The full circle moment, right? Right. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that, and I guess maybe that's when I saw that happen for the first time when I was 8. It was pretty nice. And then, I was lucky to be able to do that with my dad growing up, deer camp in Michigan. I don't know about Oregon, if that's a thing or not, but like in Michigan, it's, we also used to joke we'd get the opening day of rifle season off in Michigan.
Yeah, in school, right?
In school, yeah. Because there wouldn't be enough kids in school to count it as a day.
They just close the doors and say it's opening day.
Doesn't matter what day it falls on, we get a day off like a holiday,
I was always the odd kid. There might have been 3 or 4 kids in our class that were hunters. But for the most part, most of the kids didn't hunt. And so, you kind of knew every year which kids were going to be out of class on opening weekend. But, our deer season opened on a Saturday always. And so it was a Friday afternoon or an evening that, you might take off to go to, your hunt. Yeah. But, it's a little different in Oregon. That traditional deer camp doesn't really exist. I mean, it's I know for some people it does. But for me, it was a pickup and a camper, with my dad, loaded with gear, and we just drive off into the woods and stop the camper somewhere where we wanted to hunt. And it was like a mobile. We had a mobile deer camp. But it was something we counted on. I counted on every year. I was really just into the opening day. But inevitably, I always had a football game right before the opener. When I was beat up, I was sore. And I was probably concussed, on half of the deer openers that I went to, and I was, trying to walk around the woods and not fall down because I'd been hit in the head the night before. But
I had a couple of those too.
But I really looked forward to those weekends with my dad, because it really did just take me away from school and away from sports, and I just was immersed in that. And I think those, were some of the best times when I was a kid. Definitely the best times.
And I think more kids nowadays need that too. Unplug and get away, go outside and experience nature to a degree,
In some form.
Yeah, whether you're just hiking around or, foraging mushrooms or something, just get away from the screens. And, I don't have kids of my own, but I watch my 4 nieces that are all young, but it's like, man, they just walk around with their little tablets and phones and whatnot. But, even though I'm not trying to bash on my sister and brother or anything. They try to regulate screen time, but it's like, you see the younger kids now, and it's like they're glued to it. It's like, get away and go out in the woods and enjoy what you got too.
Exactly. And just, to even know what to look for. I think that's the thing that's really lacking. And there's just no one, there are, but it just does not seem to be an important part of our future.
Yeah.
They're always going to be the kids who want to hunt and fish.
Yeah.
But there seems to be a growing percentage of those who have just no interest in it. And it's probably just all about exposure. You know, just being exposed from an early age. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but it's definitely, if you're a fish and wildlife, if you're a person who works in fish and wildlife or is in the industry, and the future of hunting and fishing is really in recruiting new members. And if we have a hard time getting kids to go out and chase things with sticks and bows, and where's it all going to go? I don't know. Hopefully, we continue to have these opportunities. I don't know.
I hope so too.
What's going to happen? Right?
Yeah, we need to carry on the tradition. Right?
Yeah. Well, one thing you didn't catch COVID. I'm just kind of curious how that, Patricia and I got whacked, and I don't even know how that could. How is it possible that you didn't catch COVID?
I have no idea. I'm counting my lucky stars. I haven't been like you two have been last week.
Oh man,
watching you guys has been
brutal.
Yeah, I have no idea. I'm attributing it to I had some kind of exposure before I came up here and had good antibodies is my working theory, and I'm just going to stick with that.
Yeah,
or at least try to fool my body into thinking I have antibodies.
Yeah, I'm just blown away that you didn't catch it. What are you looking forward to for this season? I know it's just getting started now. We've got the boats in the water and we're dealing with some things, but for the most part, what do you look forward to? What do you just look forward to in the upcoming season?
Looking forward to clients, really. That's kind of like is a big thing for me. I really like the people, and Patricia's really fortunate. She's got a great group of returning clientele, and I enjoy forming those relationships with clients. I really do. Like, I don't fish on my own as much as I used to. I don't even really, which is kind of sad to say. I hate to admit that. I do fish by myself here and there back home, but I really enjoy the camaraderie on the river now, and I like having people with me when I'm out there. So I look forward to the clients when they get here. It's always fun to take people out and show them what you're passionate about, and we're lucky we have a really great river and we get a good push of sockeye. And so, I'm excited about kicking off sockeye season and helping guys fill up the freezers for the winter. And
that's really what it is, isn't it? I mean, people are here just to, I think it's 5 fish a day, right, per person?
Yeah, and sometimes they up it to 10.
Yeah, it's a fish cleaning process at the end of the day.
It really is. It's a lot more work than I was used to when I first. So I've always been a catch and release guide.
Yeah.
Forever until I started working with Patricia, mainly because up on the noosh we were so far up, so all our fish were turned by the time they got there. They weren't really good for table fare. Here you're so close to the mouth that we're catching fish with sea lice, and they're dime bright. They're ripping, and they're fun to catch when they're like that. They're an absolute riot. But yeah, it definitely adds another element to it where you're tired from guiding and getting people around all day, and then you get back to the dock and send them off, and then the real work seems to start there.
You offload 30 sockeye. And then
and you're sitting at the cleaning station for a while, and then the vacuum packer for a little while, right. And then you're ready to call her quits at the end.
Yeah, and then turn around and do it again the next day.
Yeah.
I know. The thing that's fascinating about here is just its location, like to the Brooks Range and the bears and all of that. When it makes a transition from sockeye into coho, is it really that much of a change in your job when it goes from sockeye to coho? Obviously, they're a different critter, but I mean, what happens?
Tactic,
with
I guess. Yeah. So different ways that we attack that fish. So for sockeye, it's a lot of bank fishing and hitting those fish as they're running up on the insides. The sockeye, the coho or the silvers seem to do a lot more out of the boat kind of work. So doing a lot of back trolling and throwing towards banks and pulling stuff away. So I guess the tactics for the fish kind of change a little bit. Not as many, so the numbers aren't there like the sockeye numbers. So it's a little more work to get your limit on those. But same kind of process, I guess. You're up a little earlier, trying to get on your runs early. Seems like the silver bites a little earlier and kind of turns off. I feel like sockeye, if they're there, you're gonna get them.
Yeah.
And then same kind of process coming back to the dock and clean fish.
Clean
back.
Yeah, so. It's a lot of work. Well, you showed me something really interesting the other day. It had to do with a jig squid kind of combo that is fascinating to me. I had never seen that before. I have to try that because that actually it's like a swim bait for coho. But it's really just using a hoochie or a squid with a jig head in it and orienting it in such a way that you have total control over the lure. And that was really interesting. Tell me how you fish that.
So the way I like to fish that is I like to get on a run. So we have a couple runs that are fairly, a couple 100 yards long or so, and I like to position the boat about 15, 20 feet off the bank and then just roll with our kicker motor and just kind of back troll down. It's almost like I'm back trolling in a way, but I'm letting my clients cast towards the bank and jig those back. And so those silvers seem to be sitting in that shallow water. Even I don't believe that they're actively spawning. There are a lot of moving fish still, but they're sitting really shallow. And just that jigging motion coming off that shallow kind of gravel as the drop off hits, it seems to really fire them up. And then,
interesting.
Yeah, so just bouncing them off at the bottom, big, aggressive, heavy jigs, and it just seems to either irritate them or something. They turn on it. They'll chase it right to the boat sometimes and smack it at the boat, or they'll hit it, sometimes right when it hits the water. But it's that big, heavy jigging motion that they really like.
It's so interesting because I do a lot of fly fishing for salmon, and when the coho come in, it's frustrating because there can be 500 coho in a pod in the pool, and they've just come in from the ocean, but you cannot get them to bite for whatever reason. It's like I'm fishing small pink clousers, or I'm fishing a small pink comet, or I'm fishing a small pink squid pattern or something.
Yeah.
Or different colors, and I strip it fast or move it, and I cannot get them to bite. And then people say, oh, well, you got to do this. And I'm like, well, I've tried that, but I can't get these coho frustrate me as soon as they hit fresh water. I cannot seem to catch them regularly with a fly rod. And so when you showed me that kind of jig squid combo, it made me think a little bit about my flies in the presentation I might make, just to try to get a few more bites on those crazy coho, because they come in and they just lock up for some reason. I can't get them to eat.
They're a little tougher on the fly, I've noticed too. My guys seem to do a little better with spinning gear.
Yeah.
And
I wonder why, because it gets right in their face. When you're.
I know, and I've tried the same. I've tried jigging. I've put heavy heads on them, like almost like dolly style, with like a really extra large cone head, and then popping them off the bottom. And we'll get them to turn on it for sure, and we'll catch them that way. But that little hoochie squid jig,
they just crush it.
They seem to really like it.
Looks like food.
Yeah, and I think they're still
like
in that mode. When they got the sea lice on them and stuff, then maybe they're still in that feeding kind of mode.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. I so much of what I love about what I do is seeing what other people are trying or improvising with. I mean, they're just putting things together, and then that works. And it's like, oh, that's a new idea. And it doesn't matter if it's gear fishing or fly fishing or whatever. Sure. People are always trying to figure out, what's the silver bullet. Of course, there isn't a silver bullet because it doesn't work 24/7. I have stories where I can remember distinctly fishing this one green fly, and on one day I absolutely roped the Chinook with it. And I have never caught another Chinook on that one fly again. For some reason, they were all into that bug. Maybe they would have eaten anything that day.
It's like the fly of the season.
Or that day, for sure. And of course, I went home and tied a whole bunch of these little green worms that I thought were going to just crush the spring Chinook, and I've never gotten a bite on that silly fly ever again. So I have a whole box now that are just those beautifully tied that worked that one day, and I should just throw them away because they don't work.
So I'm curious about swing season now, because I had a pattern that was kind of a hodgepodge between like 3 or 4 different flies that I kind of found around here, one of them being one of your flies that you left last season. And I kind of took little aspects of each fly and kind of made them into one.
Yeah.
And it seemed to really work last year. Like, we had a lot of luck. Me, Eric, and Patricia both. We all were fishing basically that pattern in 2 different colors, and we had a great season with it.
Huh.
And so now I'm wondering, too, like if it comes around this year, I'm about to tie up a bunch of them to get ready for the fall, and it's like, oh gosh, I hope that fly still works.
Yeah, right. You put so much effort into it, you get a whole box of them, and they're perfect.
Yeah, you feel like you're dialed in, and then they're not going to want that.
Eat it. Yeah. It's like, what the hell? What happened? Give me a piece of rabbit strip.
Yeah, throw dolly on there. We'll be all right.
Just hang on. Yeah, I don't know. I've spent so much of my life just chasing these critters and trying to, come up with a better mousetrap or whatever, and it just changes all the time. And I don't know why, water clarity or temperature or whatever, but it just doesn't seem to ever happen twice exactly the same way.
But also, isn't that what kind of keeps you coming back to it, too?
For sure.
Trying to figure it out.
If it were easy, it would be no fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah, I got another one. Okay. Yeah, I've had Chinook fishing like that up here in Alaska, where it was so good. I had told myself, if I make 3 casts and don't hook a fish, I'm going to go in and have a cup of coffee. And for the next 2 hours or so, I couldn't make 3 casts and not hook a fish. And I was like, well, this is as good as it gets.
But I really want that coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But to your point, I've never gone back. It's like once it's that easy and once it becomes that repetitive, I just really don't have any desire to go back and do that again, because it's kind of like,
fun with like trying to figure out that puzzle piece every year and then having it change just enough to be frustrating and have to think a little bit, because I mean that's why I don't want to, because I do it too sometimes, but throwing an egg is just so easy every once in a while, and there's some rivers that are you got to do it because that's just that's all they key in on, but the swing stuff is so much fun because it's the figuring out that pattern. Right. And figuring out what's going to get that fish to commit to a take that day.
You think about the trout, and Patricia and I were talking about this, and how much of it is getting it in their zone and having it right in their face, or how much is it being the right pattern that's what they're looking at that day, or is it a combination of both, or what is that combination that triggers that when they've seen a bunch of flies? I mean, that these fish have seen a lot of flies late in the fall.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I feel like I feel like we all have our different theories each as guides. Like I know Patricia has her recipes that work real well, and then I have mine, and Eric has his, kind of a thing. Right. But I like to think if they're up on those flats, they're hunting and they're actively trying to feed.
Yeah.
And I do think that the pattern does make a difference. Because I have seen them turn off of it. I've seen them chase. Like, a lot of times, like steelhead fishing, I had some guys get, when I first got into guiding for them that were really, I looked up to kind of as mentors kind of figures, and they would always say, if you can get them to turn and chase, that's a committed fish.
Yeah.
And I've seen these fish here turn and chase 20 feet and turn off of it once they get to it. And they just, something turns them off and they're over it. And, then it's like, then you start examining the flies and going through the box and, okay, I got a fish that's active and hungry.
Yeah.
But what's going to get them to commit that last little bit to actually eat that fly?
Yeah, I've used this before. There used to be a pool of really clear water up on the Columbia River where the summer steelhead would pour into this pool and just sit there all summer. And on the way to the Deschutes, I would stop and look down at these steelhead that were spending the summer in this cool water. I'd just pitch a nickel out there to see what would happen. And what's interesting about them is, as soon as the nickel hits the water and it starts floating down, every fish in the pool chases that nickel. They all want it. And then the second nickel you throw out there, maybe 3 or 4 of them want it. And the third nickel you pitch out there, they're all sitting there looking at it like, I'm not going to chase that nickel again. Yeah. So, I think so much of it is curiosity.
Sure.
They are after it because they're curious. And whether they eat it or not, that's a whole different, that's like another level of commitment. So, having seen them chase these nickels that are floating down into 12, 15 feet of water and how aggressively they were trying to get it on the first drop just tells me that they're just curious. They're curious creatures. They want to inspect and they play. They don't have any hands, right?
Right. So
they can't. Yeah, they're mouthing it and playing with it. But to that point of a fish that chases something down is probably the one that's going to eat it. I've had plenty of opportunities where Chinook have chased my fly right back to the boat and they just look at it and then they turn around and swim away, never to be seen again.
Yeah, muskie fishing back home.
I've
pretty much given up on that after seeing 3 or 4 different fish, chase right to the boat and then doing the figure 8 thing and they're finning, just checking it out and then go off and it's like, I'm done. This is
stupid. This is stupid. Yeah. Totally. I think something that's really important for anyone who's interested in becoming a fishing guide, particularly in Alaska, it's important that they understand, what the role is when they come up here. And you were saying something earlier about, if you want to be a fishing guide because you like to fish, you're kind of coming at this from the wrong angle. I mean, clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you got to love to fish, and you got to have that skill set of being an angler. But you got to realize that you're not fishing when you're guiding. Your clients are fishing, and you got to enjoy that aspect of it too. And you got to be able to fish through your clients per se. I guess you got to make sure that you're able to teach them techniques to make them have a successful trip. They're spending a lot of money to come up and live their fantasy of fishing in Alaska, and you want them to be successful. Read books, which is going to help you out if you can have a good couple days, week, or however many days you have them in your boat. But you also got to realize that you're not the one making the cast, and you're not the one hooking the fish and fighting the fish, and they're doing that, and you got to enjoy that part of it and coaching them through it. So it's a lot of coaching and helping them along, and that part of it you need to have passion for too. And so being good with people and how to handle people in those kind of situations.
And assessing their skills before the day begins, right? So,
absolutely.
If you have someone who's limited in their mobility or whatever, you can't plan a program that requires some difficult wading or just even a hard spot to get out of the boat.
Yeah, you're gonna have to be flexible in your day, and you can't have the same approach every single day because every client's different. Like you said, we have guys that come up in our fall swing program that are pushing 80, and mobility is a big issue for them. They still want to be successful, and they know maybe that they're not going to be able to wade X run because it's a little faster or pushier. So you're going to have those spots in the back of your mind where you can get them, or how am I going to maybe fish them out of a boat with a swing rod, with a spay rod, or how am I going to get them on this run, or you're going to have to be kind of think on the fly and figure out how to cater your day towards them for them to be successful. Like, you might be able to wade that run, but so-and-so pushing 82 years old is going to struggle on some of that pushier water.
Right. I think it's really good for younger guides just to realize that your program is going to be completely dependent upon your client, and just being aware that you'll get your day in the sun, you'll get to go fishing, and you'll have great days. But when you're working,
absolutely,
when you are working, they are fishing, and you're their eyes. You might be their eyes, or you are also their guardian. Sometimes you're their guardian angel, depending on the situations.
Absolutely.
But really, just being able to see the world through their eyes is going to help the guides who are learning how to be better. Really give that incredible experience, as you said, to someone who's spent a lot of money to come up and do this.
Yeah.
I think too. We talk about, I used to think this. I used to think that, if I booked 100 days a year as a fly fishing guide, I would be able to pay my bills. But, when you really do the math, even if you're on the river every third day and you're getting paid plus tips, a rate, it's still hard to make a decent living at 100 days a year.
Yeah, you got to love the grind.
Yes.
If you want to do it as a career. You
yes.
Gotta, like, I don't know, like the Army saying or whatever, you embrace the suck kind of a thing. you got to appreciate the days on the water. You got to appreciate the grind. When I first started, it was, that was always my goal. It was 100 days. If I can book 100 days, I might be able to make a go at this full time. And then when I got to booking 100 days, I'm like, oh man, I'm still not comfortable. I still got bills to pay and want to do things in my everyday life. But you gotta be okay grinding it out and fishing through whatever you gotta fish through to get there. I mean, right now I'm pushing 150 to 200 days a year depending on the year, and that for me is pretty comfortable. Like I can make do with that, and I enjoy my lifestyle. But like you got to do it. You got to be out there grinding out those days, and you got to just crank. And you can't just bank on a summer season. You got to have a spring season. You got to have a winter season. You got to have if you're gonna want to be a full-time fishing guide, you got to have multiple avenues to stay on the water. So I'm only here for 4 or 5 months, and then I can't live off of that for the rest of the year. I still got to fish to make money. Right.
And I think people get caught up in the idea of being a fishing guide and just don't pencil out the numbers. I mean, when I was working, I had a jet boat, I had a captain's license, I had gas bills, I had lunch bills, food. I mean, when it all adds up, I mean, you might be billing out, whatever, a $400 day, and you think that's a lot of money, but then you back out all of those other expenses and your insurance and you have to work almost every day during the season to make it work.
Then you grow out of your one boat.
Yes.
You can only do so many days on, say, a raft, and then I need a hard boat for this, or I need a jet for that. It adds up.
And you're just making monthly payments. That's all you're doing is just paying off your boats and not paying your mortgage. Yeah. It was, I don't know. It was a hard nut for me to crack because it was not going to pencil out for me.
And having a good rotation helps that too.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate where I have a pretty good rotation right now. And I have the good breaks in between so I don't get burnt out. And I think that's what happens with a lot of young guides too is when you're doing 100 days or you're doing 150 days or, you can burn yourself out pretty quick.
Yeah.
It is like a romantic vision, like you say, people want that kind of lifestyle, and it's great. And I'm not trying to discredit or discount doing that because I think, I love it, and I would love to see other people try to chase their dream like I did and make a go of it. But just realize that it's going to be a lot of work. And then having other avenues too, like, maybe you have to work a job in the winter for a couple months you don't really like, or find another place to guide in the wintertime and be okay with traveling around and hitting different places.
Well, you traveled to Chile. I mean, you worked in Chile for a while. So tell me about that. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, Chile is great. It's a lot like Montana style fishing. We're casting big foamy bugs, a lot of terrestrial hopper kind of patterns, a lot of dry fly fishing, which is kind of a nice break from up here because you're not doing any, you do some, but down there it's, 99% dry fly fishing, which is a blast. And it's all brown trout and rainbow trout and it's a riot.
So they're browns and rainbows. And you're fishing. Are you matching hatches much, or is it mostly just big stimulator patterns that are trying to get a real aggressive response?
Yeah, mainly. So where I was at, I fished the Niriwao most of the time, and it's ranch cattle country down there.
Yeah.
So it's big open fields, lots of grasshoppers. So
a
lot of grasshopper patterns. They're really kind of keyed into those grasshoppers. Beetles work really well too. But I've definitely had some interesting days down there where you'll get into a big mayfly hatch and they're turning their nose at something that normally would crush in 2 seconds and not think twice about, and all of a sudden they're keyed in on a mayfly, and you got to dig through your box and find a 14.
You hope you brought that box.
Yeah, you hope you brought that box. And I've had like epic days on smaller, more traditional style dry flies. Like, having my Michigan box was kind of handy, having a bunch of Adams and
for sure. Thank God for the parachute Adams, right?
Yeah, that fishes anywhere in the world, by the way. So
God, I've got one in a 16. Cool.
Yeah. So that was, you definitely have most of your days are big terrestrials and beetles and hoppers and just outstanding dry fly takes, and then you'll get into those days where it's rainy and cold and they're not really looking up too much, so you got to try to figure something else out. But
I had a really interesting experience last time I was down in South America. I was asked to go down and give some spay casting, actually some trout spay demonstrations through Argentina, and I ended up down south, and I was on this river with some Argentine guides, and we just had a lot of fun.
Sure.
We were not using spay rods. We were using 22 and 24 foot sink tips, casting big streamers to the bank, dredging pools. And this was far from my normal, trout spay deal. We were just chucking and ducking these giant streamers to the bank, and of course we had some beer in the boat. And
of course.
And I showed them the kind of like the 2-sip sink where you cast out and you had 2 sips of beer.
And shout out to Escudo.
Watch this. There's another one. And so, we were having good fun with that. But it just goes to show you that, you have to love to fish.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter what technique we end up, locking in on, whether it's fishing fine and far off with dry flies or, fishing giant grasshopper patterns against the bank, or whether we're dredging streamers for fish that you can't see. It's all about loving to fish, and I think that's the thing that kind of connects anyone who decides to make a life committed to guiding or a life in the outdoors of fishing or hunting. It is something that you absolutely love to do, and you have to do as a lifestyle.
Absolutely.
And it's something that it's the last thing you think about before you go to bed, and it's the first thing you think about when you wake up in the morning.
Yeah. And how many conversations this week have we had about different
I know.
I mean, we haven't even hardly fished this week.
I know. I haven't fished yet.
All we talk about
is going fishing. Or hunting.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me. I'd love to hear some more about... I've never hunted woodcock. And so I want to make a transition a little bit to you as a bird hunter, because I know you're quite a bird hunter, and you train dogs, you train labs. You're going to get a puppy here. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I don't know if she'll be a good woodcock dog.
Probably not.
Probably not. But
if it's the brown one.
No, he's a bulldozer.
The duck dog.
Yeah, he was going to be more suited for waterfowl life. But yeah, woodcock are an interesting long-billed kind of piper-looking bird. And we have them there in the Midwest and in Canada too. So where I'm at, I used to guide for that too through a private club. We would, they had about 4,000 acres. It was all kind of catered towards grouse and woodcock management. They're an interesting bird. They hold real tight. They really like the thick kind of cover, so they really like those young aspen stands. Mm-hmm. They look like a piper that you'd kind of see on the banks of the river here, but they're using that bill more to flip leaves and look for worms and other insects. And yeah, they're like a almost step on them type of bird when they flush. They're real tight kind of flushers, which makes the shooting really fun and interesting because you're usually in tight close quarters and you're in really thick kind of gnarly environment when they're going. And
wow.
Yeah,
so it's just like a quick shot. They're up and they're out.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. But they're a smaller bird, like a snipe, kind of like a
like very much like a snipe.
Yeah, we do hunt snipe when we're duck hunting sometimes. A snipe will come in and when there's no ducks flying, we'll walk along the shoreline and you'll bust some snipe and it's crazy. They'll make laps. They'll keep coming back and I can't hit the darn things.
Yeah, so it's kind of fun for we call them the flights. So we'll have like the birds coming down from like the Upper Peninsula and from Ontario coming down through Michigan. They'll make their migratory run down south. And they're kind of tired birds, so you can jump those a couple times usually. If you got a good dog, they can pick them back up, So they're tired from their migration. Yeah,
so they don't fly very far.
They don't fly very far, which is kind of fun because you can usually get on them if you could jump them. So your dog will lock up and you'll get the bird to flush. And if you miss them in that tight, because you have a little close quarter kind of shots because you're in thick woods usually. Yeah. It's like, okay, don't calm down. We're going to get him here in about 30 yards. He's going to be sitting right over there again. Wow. And usually you can jump him, a couple times before you get him.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, it is.
And you shooting 20 gauges mostly?
Mostly 20 gauges. I like the smaller rounds.
Something fast and quick in the woods.
Fast and quick, yeah. I'm really into the double guns, so I like, running over under 20 gauges or 4 tons.
Nice. And it's better when you're by yourself, obviously, because the birds are just, if you have hunting buddies, you better know where they are.
Yeah. Sure.
If you're hunting 3 abreast in a wood lot and you got one direction to shoot.
Yeah.
That bird could go. It seems like that would be a safety nightmare when.
It can be. I guess it's I've heard of other guys like I haven't really gotten into the whole pheasant game out west and the big open field kind of stuff. We don't have that kind of terrain or environment, so I've always hunted in that kind of tight close stuff, and I've definitely had some kind of sketchy
close moments
just because there's a tree here, you can't see your buddy, and so that does or you're guiding, which is kind of a nightmare in its own right when you're guiding bird hunters. That's always fun.
I imagine.
Muzzle discipline can be a bit of an issue with guys that don't hunt very often.
Yeah, I know. Well, even your best friend sometimes is a little careless with his muzzle.
Absolutely. Well, it's the excitement of the hunt. You get that flush and when they happen that fast too, I hate to say that, but sometimes people aren't thinking straight when a bird flushes 3 feet from them and makes that quick swing to the right or left.
Yeah, that's a conversation I've had with my buddies about gun safety in general because we'd all like to believe we're really, really safe with our shotguns, but man, there's been so many times either around the duck blind or climbing in and out of the duck blind or being at least around the blind where the muzzle, you bend over or you have it on a sling. Mm-hmm. And you bend over to pick up, and now all of a sudden your muzzle. So that's one thing that I don't really feel uncomfortable with my friends, letting them know when my action is open, or letting them know when my shotgun is, when I have one in the chamber, and what my plans are. Because in the duck blind, particularly, you're in close quarters, and it would be just the most horrific thing to have an accident in those quarters. There's no turning back from that. But but like you said, even when you're pheasant hunting and the birds are busting, and it's so important to have at least an orange hat or something to be able to see. And a lot of people get kind of cavalier about it. They, I don't need an orange hat. The law doesn't say I have to, so I won't.
I only have to have 25% or no. I'm covered up. I do like too. A neon light out there especially when I'm guiding.
Yeah. I love bird hunting, but man, I don't want to get shot bird hunting.
So one big thing too is we do and that's one of the things I've kind of gravitated towards the double guns is I want those guns broke open.
Yeah, that's great because you can see.
Yeah, and we're working dogs more than we're just walking and flushing birds on our own anymore. So if my dog locks up and we know we can circle in position and we can get towards that gun. Now it's okay. Guns are closed. Right.
Yeah, that's really good because with an autoloader or a pump or something like that, it's not obvious. It's not apparent, and it's honestly it's not as easy to break the action on those and keep them open like with an autoloader. But yeah, I have an over-under that I use for pheasants, and it's just always open when I approach anyone. And yeah, I think that's something that I just see it getting. I don't know, people just getting a little more casual with gun safety, and it just terrifies me because all it takes is one near miss, and you don't get a second chance.
No.
But yeah, well, that's great. You duck hunt?
Not as much as I'd like to. Yeah. I'm getting more and more into it. I tried to get into it so I have a lab. She's 12.
Yeah.
And when she was a pup, I was kind of going down that rabbit hole because it's like you got to kind of pick your poison.
It's true.
It's like each thing. Like archery has been a big thing for me for a long time, and I have, I've gone down that rabbit hole pretty hard. And then as soon as you get a dog and you start training, and then you lay out blinds and decoys, and next thing you know, you got a trailer, and you're loaded up for every situation that you can imagine, right?
Oh God!
And so it's like you kind of got to pick your poison. I got fly fishing and traditional gear fishing and trolling and archery hunting and upland hunting, and now it's like, oh man, how many more things can I really dive into? Because I'm sure you're cut from that kind of cloth too. You don't like to half-ass those kind of things. It's like when you get into it, kind of, and I'm it's bad. It's a bad thing.
It's a jet boat with 100 mallard decoys and all the stuff to go with it, and an aquapod, and next thing you know, you're spending most of your time just setting your stuff up, and you're not even hunting.
Yeah.
It's like I could probably do the same thing with 6 decoys and
I know it. Which is what we do here. That's what kind of got me. Yeah, right. And that's what kind of got me back into it a little bit more around here. Is like last fall, we start our swing program. We kind of start a little bit later in the day, which is kind of nice. It's a little bit colder in the fall, so we're letting it kind of warm up a little bit before we get out there, and then we get the run usually when. People go in and then we have like a little more time out there, getting to pick and choose where we want to go fish. But having those kind of slow starts in the morning, I was starting to get into a little bit of duck hunting in the morning here, which is a blast.
Yeah.
And so, the puppy is over there waiting to be trained. And
wow, that's going to be great.
Yeah.
That was so cool when we had puppies here last week. That was just... Even though we were all sick, except for you, it was really great to see the puppies because that just kind of livened everybody.
Oh yeah, that was really exciting.
Yeah, I'm glad she's okay. I'm glad that Ellie's, a good mommy, and that the puppies are doing so well. They're growing so fast. Wow.
They are growing so fast. That little chocolate, I think I got a little thing for him. That little bulldozer.
He's a bruiser. Well, I think just. Thinking about the season that's coming up and thinking about people who want to possibly become fishing guides and what would be your final bit of advice for anyone who has been listening to this and is thinking I think I would like to try my hand at guiding at a lodge in Alaska. I mean, what would be a bit of advice that you would have for them, anyone who's considering that as a possibility?
I'd like to say just jump off the deep end and go for it, but just realize what you're getting yourself into too. Make sure you're able to kind of go for it. I think Alaska is really good for young guides, especially because it'll make you break you up here, and I've seen that throughout the years of being here, especially at Dave's camp, being in a remote setting, you either have the love for the game or you don't, and it'll either you'll realize that while you're in the moment and you're doing it, or you're going to be on the flight out because you're not going to be able to handle it. But when I first got into guiding, I was doing it in Michigan, and doing the salmon runs in Michigan, doing the trout fishing and the steelhead stuff, and I had a guy that I really liked, and he's like, man, if you really want to do Alaska, he's like, I think it's great for any young guide getting into thinking that they want to do a career in guiding is run a season or two in Alaska and feel what it's like to run 30 days in a row or before you get a day off, and see if you can keep up with that grind. And if you like that and you appreciate that work, then you realize it pretty quick, or you realize that, hey, maybe this isn't really for me, and that's a little too much. I think Alaska is a good place to kind of learn that about yourself.
Yeah, you're going to be asked to do things that you don't want to do.
Yeah, it's not all guiding. It's not all fishing. There's a lot of work that has nothing to do with what you're doing on the river with clients, and you got to like all of it. You got to enjoy every aspect of it. And I'm lucky I do. I like the grind. I appreciate the grind. I have fun with it. And I look forward to it every year coming up here and getting going. But I remember up at Dave's camp, having to dig, shit pits you're going to the bathroom in a bucket for 4 months and burying it out back kind of thing. And right. That's something that they don't tell you when they hire you, right? No,
it's not in the manual.
Yeah, no, you learn that on the fly per se. So I was like, you gotta like all of it. Working on boats and having to think on the fly, because up here you can't just run to the hardware store, which you found out this week, right? Heck yeah. Finding a little part that you could find anywhere back in the lower. You got to be able to improvise or use your wood savvy or whatever, to kind of work your way through a situation, or to fix something while you're out on the river and you got people with you and they're depending on you to get them home. There's a lot of things that get thrown at you here, and you learn a lot of, I guess, about yourself and about what you can handle and what you can't handle. And so I think if you're thinking about guiding as a career, and if you're thinking about even doing it in the lower 48, it's always good to maybe try to get in with a lodge in Alaska or an outfit in Alaska and run a season and see what it's like to really grind out a 4-month, 5-month program and fish every day for, sometimes you don't, like the last year, I think I did 35 days straight before I got a day off when sockeye season started, which is okay by me. I don't mind it, but some people might not like that.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. Great words. Well, thank you so much. This has been a kick in the pants.
Yeah,
and I don't know if you've done a podcast before, but
that was the first timer.
Well, you were a natural. All right, well, have a good season, and I'll check in with you at the end of the year.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
All right, thanks. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Fin and Fire with your host, Jeff Mishler, a podcast where I get to interview some of the most interesting people in the world of hunting and fishing. I invite you to go to finandfire.com and check out the West Coast's largest dealer of Sitka gear, Crispy boots, and Mystery Ranch packs.